Well, hello again. It's Junkyard Sam, and today I'm going to show the process I use to scan a drawing and get it loaded into Rebelle ready to color. So the first thing I do is I've scanned the drawing. I used a setting of 300 DPI that gives a nice high resolution image that will be suitable for printing once it's colored. So I'm going to open that image in Rebelle. So here's my raw scan. And immediately you will notice some problems. It's rotated on the page. There's dots because I drew on graph paper, and you'll see blue lines. Sometimes I use a technique that comic artists used to use where I will draw a rough sketch in blue, and then I do my final line art in black. Now, if you didn't do this, you can skip the step where I remove the blue lines. But let me get started on the process. Here we go. So the first thing to do, let's get the drawing rotated correctly. So I'm going to go to Layer, Transform Layer, and I'm going to do a little trick here. I'm going to hold space to pan the image up, and you'll see I can see it against the edge. And now I'm going to rotate. I'm going to rotate the layer until it's perfectly straight against that edge. Let's see. How's that look? And that looks good. Now the next step, the drawing's way too big, so we're going to use the cropping tool right here, and I'm going to drag the corner in to cut out some of that extra space around the drawing. So that looks good on that side. Now let's get this side. That seems pretty good to me. Okay, so that looks good. Now, there's any number of ways to remove those blue lines, but I'm going to use a little trick here. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to use the color sampler to sample one of these. I'm going to get one of these dark blue colors here. That's probably good right there. Maybe this one. Ah, there we go. That's a nice, fairly dark blue. Now, I'm going to grab the pastel tool. I'm going to make it real big. Pan my drawing over. Now I'm just going to fill in the drawing with this blue color. Notice it's actually covering up my drawing. We're going to change the layer blending mode on this blue layer to darken. So now you'll see the blue lines are gone, but it's the drawing's blue. So we're gonna flatten the image. We're gonna drop the layer down. So I'm gonna click this button here, and this flattens the blue onto the line art. But again, it's still blue. So now we're going to go to Filter, Desaturate. I'm gonna use average setting. I'm gonna say Apply, and it's still gray. So now we're going to go to Filter, Brightness Contrast. Now it's pretty dark right here, so it might take a couple of passes. So I'm going to turn the brightness all the way up. I'm going to turn the contrast up to about here. It's going to take 2 passes. So I'm going to say Apply. I'm going to do the same thing again. Filter, Brightness, Contrast. Oh, there we go. Now you can see the background's it's very white. And let's adjust the contrast. What we're trying to do is get we want the paper to be completely white and the line art to be completely black. And I think we have achieved that. So I'm going to say apply. And that seems good to me. Now at this stage, I like to do some cleanup. So I will typically use something like the pastel tool. This is a good thing to fix. Look at the edge of this wing. I'm gonna paint that out right there. Give that a nice sharp edge. And that's good enough for now. So for the next step, I want to be able to see Rebelle's canvas through the drawing. And right now we're just seeing the scan. So I'm going to say filter white to alpha. And what this does is it takes anything white and it will make it transparent. Ah, there we go. Now we see Rebelle's canvas texture showing through. This is a good time to change our canvas settings. So I'm going to come down to this little paper texture right next to the canvas. I'm going to double click there. And now I like to use kind of a yellow tone because I like to work in a moleskin and the paper is kind of yellow. So I'm going to try to mimic that. So let's use moleskin. Let's use needle felt paper. Seems like a good texture for this drawing. And then say OK. Oh, notice this setting here, texture scale. This will determine how big or small the texture is on the page. So if you have it a setting at a 100 and it seems too big on the page, you can just come back into this window. I like to dial it down to 50 for my needs and say OK. And now we have a nice texture here. Now this texture might be a little bit strong, so let's go to Window, Visual Settings, and you'll see I have the texture visibility turned all the way up to 10. So let's lower that. You'll see if I turn it all the way down, you don't see any paper texture. If you turn it all the way up, you see a lot. So let's just say 5. I think 5 is the default setting anyway. And that looks pretty good to me. Let's change the blending mode to multiply. And we don't see any difference now, but we will once we have color underneath. I'm going to lower the opacity of this layer because those blacks are a little strong. So let's take it down to about 80%, maybe 82%. And that gives it's a little bit less contrasty on the page. And the line work will also show some of the color from underneath. So let's double click on this layer and call it line. Call it line art. And now let's create a new layer by clicking here. And let's call it color. Now we want our color layer to show underneath the line work. So let's drag the color layer underneath the line work. Now I'm going to use the watercolor tool. I'm going to adjust my color set over here. And let's paint this dinosaur. So let's pick this nice yellow-green here. I'm going to use the brackets on my keyboard to make the brush bigger and smaller. Now the fun thing about Rebelle is watercolor is a magical medium because you can work kind of rough. You don't have to be real precise and it just looks good. That's true in real life and it's true with Rebelle. There's no other software that has this kind of watercolor blending. With Rebelle, you'll see that the color is actually sinking into the page. And so you can be kind of loose. It's okay if some of the color bleeds outside of the lines. That's all right. Some of the imperfections are what make the art look more analog, which is kind of the whole point of Rebelle. Now, what I'm noticing here is we're seeing a very opaque green. We're not seeing the paper color through it. So I'm going to change this layer blending mode, the color layers blending mode, to multiply. And you'll see now, see how it became more yellow? That's because the paper color is showing through, because now it's just multiplying the color onto the canvas. Now, this is a flat color of green, so let's see what happens if we add a little bit of yellow in there, so we get some hue shifting. So I'm going to lower the pressure, and I'm just going to kind of gently paint a little bit of yellow over the green. And because our layer is still wet, I don't have to deal with blending, because Rebelle's going to do it for me. And that's just the magic of Rebelle, because I'm painting wet on wet. And so you'll see how the yellow soaks into the green, and I get a nice blend. And that looks beautiful. So now I forgot to paint the other leg. When you're using the brush tool, you can hold Alt to quickly access your eyedropper. Now there's a few modes that you should know about. Holding down Alt gives you quick access to the settings. And if you go to the sample setting, you'll see there's 3 modes. So this one here is, this means it will sample color only from the currently selected layer. This one will select color from all the layers. That means I'll be picking up the color from the line work, the color from this color layer, and the color from any other layer, but not the paper color. This one here, it samples colors from all layers and canvas. So we want to use this one so that we're only sampling colors from the current layer. You'll see as I drag the color sampler over the line work, it doesn't react, because it's only sampling from my color layer, which is very handy. And again, it's getting the true colors. It's not getting the colors mixed with the paper color. So let's grab this color of green, and I don't want my drawing to bleed anymore. I don't want it to be wet anymore. So I'm going to click the this button to dry the layer. So now my paint is dry, and let's turn the pressure back up. Let's paint this other leg. Again, I don't have to be real precise because the paint will soak into the paper. I just love that. And that looks good. Looks good to me. Let's dry the layer. And let's paint the inside of the dinosaur's mouth. What's a good color for that? Let's use pink. No, maybe this dark pink. Okay. And that's too dark, so let's go lighter. There we go. Looks good. Now let's go with like more of a red for his tongue. Dinosaurs probably didn't have red tongues, but this one does. Okay. So that's looking pretty good. Let's dry the layer. And let's use a kind of a yellow to paint the dinosaur's chest. There we go. And the yellow's standing out a bit from the green. So I'm going to take a darker yellow, kind of mix it in here. And again, this is wet on wet. And so you'll actually see the color spread. And it just kind of mixes together on its own in a nice way. And now let's add some green into it so it doesn't look so different. So I'm going to color sample the green. I'm going to reduce my pressure again so it's not so intense. And I'll just put a little bit of that green in there. It's kind of pulls it all together, right? Now I'm going to show something else that's really useful. Sometimes with line art, it's useful to actually color the lines. Now, if this was done on paper, that would be pretty hard because the line colors are what they are. But in Rebelle, we can use this button right here. It says lock transparency. So we've selected the line art layer, and now we're locking the transparency. And what this will allow me to do is it's going to allow me to draw over the lines, but it will only color the lines because it's going to ignore any part of that layer that is transparent. It's going to preserve transparency, just like the button says. So let's go to the pastel tool. I'm going to color sample. Oh, but look, I can't color sample the colors from the color layer now. That's because we need to go up here and change the setting to sample color from all layers, but not the canvas. And now we can get those colors even though we're on the line art layer. So I'm going to select this yellow, make my brush a little bigger. And now I'm going to paint those lines. You see, it just makes the lines lighter now so they don't stand out so much. Now this is why we made the line art a multiply layer. If I change it back to normal, watch the lines on the dinosaur, they disappear. The magic of setting a line art layer to multiply is you can use a really cool technique where you sample the color that's underneath the line work and then paint the lines with that same color, and it just kind of it lessens the intensity of the black. And if you do this to your entire drawing, it gives it a nice effect. Sometimes in cartoons, you will see that they use that technique on the backgrounds, but then they leave the black lines on the characters, and that helps the characters stand out against the background. So this is a really useful technique. Oh, and one more thing while we're here. If you do this technique and you color all the lines the same color that's underneath them, you might still want them darker. So I'm going to go to Filter, Brightness, Contrast, and I'm just going to lower this. So you can see now I can make them, the lines are still the color that we painted them, but they're a little darker. That seems about right. Now let's go to the color layer. And with Rebelle 3, these filters were added. The color balance tool can be really nice. It allows you to shift the colors. There we go. Look at that. Now this effect is more pronounced when you have a full color image. There we go. Now if you remember, previously the dinosaur was very green and his chest was very yellow, and the colors didn't really go together that well. Now, if this was real watercolor, we would have to live with that. But with Rebelle, we can just edit those colors, and what that means is the art it's more true to the wishes of the artist. So I'm going to apply that. I still think these yellows are a bit saturated, so I'm going to go to Filter, Hue Saturation. And I'm going to pull the saturation down a bit. In fact, let's not do it to the whole area. Let's go to the Marquee tool. And I'm going to use the freehand selection. I'm just going to draw around the yellow area. Now if I hold shift, it's going to add to my selection. And if you hold alt, it will subtract from your selection. So let's clean that up a little bit. Let's go to Filter, Hue Saturation. Now it's only going to apply the effect to my selection there. So let's lower the saturation about 25%, maybe 20%, maybe darken it a little bit. In fact, let's shift the hue some. And that seems pretty good. So we'll say apply. This is basically how I get started doing a painting in Rebelle. I love the software. It's professional enough to get professional results, but it's friendly enough that people that aren't super technical can easily hop in and make art with it. You're not overloaded with tools. It has just the right amount of tools to get your work done. So yeah, I'm really excited about Rebelle 3, and I hope this was useful.